wards that aren't used to infectious diseases. They're not used to respiratory infectious diseases. And in many of those wards, long-term care living facilities or geriatric wards, they're not wearing contact personal protective equipment, protecting against respiratory droplets. Once a COVID patient is identified and the appropriate PPE is used, then we can prevent transmission. The other reasons why we're seeing healthcare worker infections are extended periods in wards where individuals are working very long shifts. In some situations, they have not had adequate PPE, which includes masks, goggles, face shields, gowns, gloves. In some hospitals, there has been reports of suboptimal hand hygiene, so making sure that healthcare workers use hand hygiene is very, very important. What we do also see from these studies is that when healthcare workers do wear appropriate PPE, which includes protecting against respiratory droplets and contact transmission, and in situations where aerosol generating procedures are conducted and there's airborne precautions are necessary, we're not seeing that transmission take place. So that is really critical. But we are constantly looking at the literature that is coming out to better understand how we can better protect healthcare workers. We can ensure that their shifts are shorter, that they have adequate rest periods, that we look out for their mental health and their well-being, and that they have adequate supplies of personal protective equipment.
I could just add, when we define healthcare worker, I mean, we sometimes imagine that's healthcare workers working in very sophisticated tertiary facilities. A lot of healthcare workers have been affected in the front lines in long-term care facilities as well, and in primary health care to general practitioners and others. So the protecting workers who work in COVID-19 isolation units and intensive care can work extremely well if they have the right equipment and training. But we also have to look at the risk management for those other frontline workers who may come into contact with COVID-19 cases to ensure that they're adequately protected too. So it's a complex issue, and the definition of health worker in this case is very broad.
Thank you very much for this answer. Before we go to the next question, just to remind that we are operating with Zoom, so people wanting to listen Hindi interpretation will have to go to settings and choose Japanese language, and those who would like to listen in Arabic, they have to choose Korean language. Next question, Nicola Smith from Telegraph. Nicola? Nicola?
Hi,
yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for the question. It's on the subject of Taiwan's invitation to the WHO, the WHA as an observer to Dr. Tedros. Last week, the WHO implied that a sticking point was based in UN resolutions that recognize only representatives of the PRC can represent China at the WHA. However, Taiwan's foreign ministry and Taiwanese lawyers say that the resolutions only address the question of China's representation and not the separate issue of Taiwan's attendance. Given that Beijing's One China principle is not international law and not universally recognized, critics of the WHO and the Director General's reluctance to invite Taiwan say that you're making a political call if you fall into line with Beijing's views on the issue. How would you respond to that?